Hey everyone, welcome to the first ever episode of the Stardom TI official podcast on Spotify, YouTube, and any other platforms you may be watching on. My name is Casey McGregor, and I am the host of the podcast. I'm also the lead author and founder of Stardom TI. So, I thought I would just make a quick sort of trivia here. So Stardom TI, so the TI in Stardom TI, right? So it's actually just an abbreviation. And the abbreviation is, so the full name is Stardom Tech Industries. So I've been through a few business names over my fair few years of trying to get these endeavours off the ground, trying to find the best way to do it, and more importantly, trying to actually start writing novels, which is sort of the core business at the moment. So, and I've actually got some news about those too, if you'll stay tuned in. So I was just sort of giving that little bit of trivia there. So I've gone through a few names before. I think the first name I was going to go with was Canmo Corporation, but this is when I was younger and probably a bit too silly to realise that corporation implies a company, which it is not at the moment. Then I went to Canmo Entertainment, which sort of was like, because the name of Canmo Corporation sort of felt like it was like a way to sort of put that image forward that, like, this ain't one industry. Like, I will be branching out, and I still plan on doing that today. But I'd sort of say that Canmo Entertainment definitely sort of, it limited that scope a little bit. I mean, entertainment can be used as a bit of an umbrella term, but I felt like it didn't really grasp the full scope of what I'm trying to do. So when I was sort of thinking that, okay, new name, new idea, let's go. So I came up with the first incarnation of what would become the current name, Star Technologies, because I was thinking, obviously I was still pretty young, and I was sort of thinking, okay, so I wouldn't mind going into, like, pushing hard into, like, technology and gaming, and, like, maybe sort of make a game console one day, which obviously right now is not really that realistic, while I'm just starting out and not even making money. But I would sort of say that also, sort of be like an element there where, like, that was the start. Like, I was like, okay, that's this name I'm gonna go with, but I feel like it needs to be fleshed out a little bit. So I sort of then went, okay, let's lengthen it a little bit and make a new logo and, like, all that sort of stuff. So, and that led to the name Stardom Tech Industries. There was a different logo I'd created, completely unrecognizable from now. It was something a little bit more sleek and, like, if I remember, like, I swear that when I was making, like, sort of the image, the icon, the reason I sort of didn't want to go back to what I had before, when I was sort of coming up with this, like, real rebranding before I actually started properly launching things, was sort of very much the crest that I had, or the icon, felt a bit too inspired from the Warner Brothers logo. Just rather than a WB, it was a ST. And so I thought, okay, yeah. And then life happened. And it kind of got shelved for, like, a while. And I've sort of come back to it recently. As I've sort of... Not really recently, but, like, this year, definitely. And I've been really trying to sort of, okay, I've got to do this. So I looked at that name again, Stardom Tech Industries, and I was like, okay, STI. I was like, immediately, as soon as I said that, I was like, yeah, nope, let's not go there. But I guess I was sort of, so I decided to keep Stardom the way it was and go Stardom TI, so the TI for Tech Industries. And I would say, like, the name probably doesn't fit as well as I want it to at the moment. Just as, like, there's not much of that tech in there, since it's mainly at the moment sort of this podcast, the novels over on Wattpad and on various other platforms later, YouTube, and it's like, I want to flesh out later, like, but obviously it's got to become profitable. But yeah, that's pretty much like how Stardom TI got its name. And so I think with that out of the way, that went for much longer than I wanted it to. But let's go ahead to the first big Stardom TI announcement. Okay, so here's the first big announcement of this episode. So I am thrilled to announce that Sonic Revolution, so one of the first 2 novels that I've been writing, is the first few chapters, so the prologue and first 2 chapters as of this recording, as of the launch of this episode, are live, published, and available now on Wattpad for free. So, some people probably don't know what Sonic Revolution is. I'm sure you've probably heard of Sonic the Hedgehog. Like, I mean, if you haven't, and you're, like, less than, like, 35 years old, you've probably been living under a rock, in the gaming sphere. But, basically, Sonic Revolution is a darker fanfiction hard reboot of the Sonic series. So this has been a passion project of mine. I have been working on it, well, I've been planning to work on it, and sort of coming up with storylines and, like, ideas of how to, where the story should go for years, like, literally years. So I've probably been planning this for about as long as I've been planning the business itself. Possibly even earlier. So, basically, the story takes place in, like, I don't want to say post-apocalyptic. I don't really want to say dystopian either, because it doesn't really show those sorts of... So, it's basically like trying to get my words here, but it's basically like a darker reimagining of the series taking place in a hypothetical future approximately 10,000 years from now. So basically, for the characters, I've gone for like a triple protagonist and a triple antagonist sort of dynamic. So, the three protagonists, obviously, are Sonic the Hedgehog, is one of them. But for the other two, I've actually gone with Shadow the Hedgehog and Amy Rose. So, and basically, so that, like, I think you'll notice if you read, even what's there now, is that a lot of these characterizations, certain parts of them have been turned on their head. So, I should mention basically that they sort of go to school at, like, the start. So, not Shadow. Shadow's sort of... Shadow's a more interesting one. Mainly because of his backstory. But, so, like, Sonic, Amy, Tails, Knuckles, like, they all go to school. They're all in high school. So, what I actually did is, like, so Sonic and Amy and, like, Tails, they're sort of 16, and Knuckles is like 17, but then I've got some other... I've done a lot of changes to sort of the characterizations, their sort of biographies, backstories even. So, like, some of the characters, like, some might seem almost unrecognizable. So I don't want to say unrecognizable. I would probably say, like, they've definitely had a paradigm shift in, like, roles, characterizations, and all that sort of stuff. But basically, yeah, it's interesting. But basically, the whole point of, like, the story is sort of, it's very much like, as I said, it's a passion project of mine. I've been working on planning and ideas, and even drafting, actually. I skipped on that part, but drafting, 4 years. And basically, I'm finally writing what should hopefully be the final draft, which, I mean, I'm publishing it now, so I'm pretty sure it's going to be the final draft. I mean, after 5 years, it's taken long enough. But basically, I'll sort of go through some of these characterizations, or some of the changes to the characterizations. Just a few little hints so you know where I'm sort of going with this. But before I go into those characterizations, I would love for, I've actually put a Q&A in this episode today. Oh no, a poll, sorry. A poll, not a Q&A, that's to sell off at the end. But the poll is sort of, who is your favourite Sonic character? So basically, there's a few options there. It's mainly like, it's basically the main cast who are actually going to be in the novel. And, I mean, if I get a few responses, I may go into more detail, but basically, yeah, so that poll is there. That's actually going to be open until the end of the year, mainly for stragglers. Oh, mainly because I don't actually have any listeners at the moment, as of recording this. As of the posting of this episode, but that's okay. That's okay. Everyone starts at the bottom, everyone starts somewhere, but basically, let's get into the characterizations. Okay, so here we go, into the characterizations for Sonic Revolution. So I'm going to start with, obviously, the main man himself, Sonic the Hedgehog. So, Sonic actually starts out in this story not as Sonic, as we know him. So, he actually starts out just as a regular brown anthropomorphic hedgehog. So, it looks the same. Think like some of the... I think the people who have read the old UK Fleetway Sonic the Comic series will know exactly the sort of design I'm talking about. Sort of like brown furred, none of the speed, and all of the insecurities, which was not in that comic, but I've added it here. So he basically starts out as like a social outcast type of caricature. So, and basically, so his name here is Sonny Hedgehog, so Sonny. And basically, so obviously, as I said before, like, all the characters here, like the teenage characters, are all sort of in school. So they're at high school. The school's called Mobotropolis High, because the area that they're in is the city of Mobotropolis. And basically, Sonny is like, he's the social outcast, like he doesn't really have any friends apart from his best friend, Miles Tails Prower. So, I won't go into Tails' characterization today, because there are sort of other elements there. I will mention that Tails plays a bit of a third wheel towards the start, though. And I'll actually explain why that is. So, Son Amy shippers who might be in the audience, who might be listening right now. Basically, I've kind of switcherooed that a little bit. So, the novel does have romance elements between multiple characters. And the Son Amy dynamic here has very much been shifted. So, Sonny being the social outcast, he has a crush on Amy Rose, who is, and I'll sort of get into her characterization here, she is the popular girl, so like, the popular girl. And like, all the jocks and all the nerds are asking her out for their own reasons, and she's turning them all down. But Sonny and Amy were childhood friends. And basically, there's a lot more details to go in later. And I'll sort of leave those up to you guys to read the book and sort of see where that all sort of fits. And basically, so I'll go into Amy's sort of characterization now. I won't actually go into how Sonny becomes Sonic, because I haven't written it yet. I know what's going to happen, I just don't want to spoil it before I publish it. Before I publish that particular portion of the book. Which, some people may be a little disappointed to hear that, like, it's gonna still be a few chapters before that transformation occurs. But in the grand scheme of, like, the raw length that this novel is going to be, it is still within, like, probably the first third of the novel. Which, I mean, if I've already made probably... If I've already gone for a prologue and 2 chapters, all 3 of which are very unorthodoxly, very unorthodox in length, like they're really long. And I think that's going to be sort of a general trend with a lot of these chapters. They're going to be a fair bit longer than, like, a normal chapter, which, like, where I'm writing it on an A3 document in Microsoft Word. On my phone. The same phone I'm using to record this. And basically, like, that, I've finished up to chapter 2. Chapter 2 has been published. I'm actually on chapter 3. But basically, it's going to, like, this is going to take me a while. Just because, like, the story is going to be very long. Like, I think as of chapter 2, or as of where I'm writing on the document, there is at least 10,000 words already. And I've barely even started to actually scratch the real tension yet. Or the start of the real sort of escalations. And basically, that's sort of where I'm at with that. So I reckon, like, by the time I'm finished, the story's probably going to be like 100,000 words at the very minimum. It's probably going to be more. Considering it's taken 2 chapters to literally just introduce all the characters. 2 chapters and a prologue. To just introduce all the main players in the story. Let's introduce them. Half of them haven't even been properly fleshed out yet. And I would actually mention that too before I continue with these characterizations. I am also in the process of writing tie-in short stories to sort of flesh out a lot of the side characters, because there will be a lot of characters here, both characters that have appeared in official media in the past, and also some original characters as well. So I'll go into probably a couple of these original characters this episode, but a lot of it will have to sort of wait. So basically, I'm going to move on to Shadow now. So Shadow, his backstory for the most part is intact, so don't chew my head off. Sonic fans there, or Shadow fans. His backstory is, for the most part, intact. So he was still sort of created 50 years prior to the events on the Space Colony Ark by Professor Gerald Robotnik. And he still has the whole backstory involving Maria Robotnik, but with a few key changes. And I'll get into how all of this relates to the villains when I go into that in a little bit. But basically, so some very key changes have been made to Shadow's backstory, which they seem like very minute details, but the repercussions of those small changes throughout the story literally turn half of what you would expect on its head. I should also mention that Shadow will be he will have a big role to play in sort of like the medium-term plan for the Sonic Revolution series. I've sort of already vaguely announced some Shadow-centric storylines. Sort of tie into it. But basically, I'll go through all of that now. So, the future Sonic Revolution stuff that I've got like sort of cemented after this novel is so Sonic Stories of the Revolution, which is going to be the short story tie-ins, or sort of the brand of the short story tie-ins to this novel. And obviously that'll focus on all these side characters, so I'm not rambling on making like a 500,000 word book to copy different perspectives of the same scene multiple times from different characters. But basically, other than that, I'm going to have a two-part Shadow-centric storyline. And some Shadow fans may be excited by this prospect. So, with basically the first part of this will be, so it'll be a two-parter. The first part will be a comprehensive leap into Shadow's backstory within this alternate universe, which it's basically going to, like, the prologue goes into like some of his backstory. Like, it goes into mainly the Ark incident, when GUN raids it and shoots everyone. But basically, the first part of this Shadow storyline will be a comprehensive look at his backstory, and also like the motivations Gerald had for creating him in the first place in this universe, which there is some very different reasons why Gerald created Shadow in this universe. And it'll definitely be sort of going into that. I think the first novel will start to scratch on the surface of that sort of thing, of that sort of stuff. But the first part of the Shadow storyline will certainly dive straight into it. With sort of the events of the scope of the events in that particular first part will be sort of based from a time period of 75 years to about 40 years before the events of the main novel. And it'll focus on like Shadow, Maria, Gerald, and sort of a lot of sort of their backstories and sort of like the ramifications of those events on sort of what happens in the current novel. The second part, all I'm gonna say is two things. It is an epilogue to this novel. So obviously, like, it's the second part, it's the sequel to the first part. But it serves as an epilogue taking place not too long after the first novel that is currently out now. And basically, the only other thing I'll sort of give away at the moment is that the storyline will take inspiration from the Shadow the Hedgehog game from 2005, so your black arms and all that sort of stuff. But it'll be loosely based on it, like very loosely based on it. It will not... In fact, I would nearly dare say that the only real story elements that have really carried over is the black arms being there. And how they tie into it. But apart from that, a lot of the slate has been wiped clean, simply because there are literally so many things in that game that wouldn't make sense with what happens in this novel. Which I'm not going to go into. And basically, so, now that I've got Shadow out of the way, because I rambled on about that for a little bit. So, let's go into the villains. So we have 3 villains for 3 heroes. So, and there are sort of specific dynamics for that. So I've got it like it's a pairing system. Like each of the heroes has their own villain. Although the heroes are on the same side, they work together. The villains are on the same side, they work together. And before I go into the villains, I will sort of break out the bombshell that this story, just as much as it takes from like sci-fi, fantasy, dystopian fiction tropes, there is also a lot of political groundwork and motivations behind both sides. Especially by the end. And basically, so the 3 villains who have already been introduced for the most part, they've at least been mentioned. Only one has actually been written in yet with an appearance, but the other 2 have been mentioned. So I'll start with Sonic's main villain. Obviously, Dr. Eggman. But I've changed his name. Not drastically, like, so his name here is Dr. Julian Robotnik. And basically, he is obviously the grandson of Gerald Robotnik. And basically, yeah, so we got all that there. But Julian Robotnik, there are some very key differences between Julian Robotnik here and the Eggman we've all grown to in the games and such. He's much more cunning and calculating than narcissistic and over the top like Eggman in the games. Because I don't think that, like, some elements of Dr. Eggman's personality, like some of the really comedic sides of his personality, don't really fit with this total seriousness of this story. Which, the tone, some of you are probably wondering, what do I say when I mean dark? Like, how dark? And I will get into that more and more down the line, but I think, you'll definitely start to notice just by reading what I've done so far. But even that's just scratching the surface of where it's gonna go. But basically, so that's Julian Robotnik. He serves as the secondary antagonist of the entire novel. Secondary antagonist. So he's not the big bad. He's not the main bad guy. And Julian Robotnik is basically the founder and CEO of Meteortech, which is Mobotropolis's largest military weapons and robotics manufacturer. So basically, yeah, he's bad. He's bad. Surprise. He's on the bad side. And he provides weapons to GUN and also makes robots. Surprise. He makes robots. Of course he makes robots. So let's go into Shadow's main villain. Shadow's main villain is Commander Abraham Tower of GUN. And if you read the prologue, you'll quickly notice that, much like in the Shadow the Hedgehog game, their backstories are connected. So, Abraham Tower, I've taken his name from the Archie comics because he doesn't have a name in the games. Doesn't have a name, he's just the commander. I could have gone the movie route, but nah. I don't. I feel like that Commander Walters or whatever from the movies is just very different. Although the third movie may explain that a little bit more, but basically, Abraham Tower as a child was on the Ark with Shadow and Maria when Shadow was created, and basically he's got a vengeance against Shadow because Maria is dead. And he blames Shadow for it, of course. So, Commander Abraham Tower will serve as Shadow's main antagonist throughout the story, and the tertiary antagonist of the entire story. That brings us to Amy. Her antagonist is the primary antagonist of the story. And when I said political, I meant political. Amy's main antagonist and the primary antagonist of the story is President David King of Mobius. Think somewhere in between Adolf Hitler and Vladimir Putin. That's where President David King sits on the sort of motivational spectrum. He hates the anthropomorphs. He's got a position of a lot of power. And I'll go into a lot more of that later in future episodes. But basically, that's where we're at with that. So that's our main 6. So 3 heroes, 3 baddies. That's our sort of main dynamic of the cast. And there are plenty more details I haven't gone into yet. But I think if you read the book, you'll quickly figure out a lot of the stuff I've just said. I don't want to go around and spoil the entire thing. Because, why? So basically, that's the characterizations for Sonic Revolution. And now I'm going to get into the second major announcement of this episode, which, if you read the title, you know what that is. Let's go. Okay, so here is the second big announcement of the day, pretty similar to the first. So Frenquin, an unlikely hero, is also available for free now on Wattpad. Currently available is the prologue. There's an introduction beforehand, before the prologue, and then there's the first 2 chapters. Also. So, Frenquin, an unlikely hero, is the first installment in the Frenquin series, which will be long-running. I've got a lot planned for that series there. A lot of stories and plans to, a lot to tell in the future. But yeah, basically, that's available there on Wattpad for free as well. So I'll talk a little bit about that one. So basically, the story takes the form of like a sort of political war drama, and basically there are 3 main characters who have all been introduced into the story at this point, who I will be talking about today. So the first is Dylan Chanders. So Dylan Chanders is the main protagonist. And basically, so he is a former Australian Defence Force infantry soldier, who at the start of the novel has spent the last 6 months fighting on the nation's side against the League of Liberators. So the League of Liberators is basically a libertarian terrorist organization, and they're led by the main antagonist of the story, and his name is Claudius Sullivan. He's an ex-CIA agent, who's basically founded the League of Liberators in order to help fulfill his goals of liberating the world from the idea of separate nations being governed independently, and basically democracy as a whole. Claudius is striving for one unified world. One unified world order. All the nations of the world ruled by one government. And basically that's where his deal is at the moment. And basically Dylan is captured 6 months into the war during a battle in Melbourne, and he ends up joining the Liberation. There's this ongoing push towards the younger generations. So Australia and New Zealand are actually the first countries being attacked by the League of Liberators in this book. Basically, it's sort of like he'd might call countries like the US and all of them, like, I'll take these people out and then that'll be that. So, and I'll move on to the third character that I sort of want to talk about. Her name is Solana Richmond, and she is basically the love interest of Dylan Chanders. So basically, I won't talk too much about her, but Dylan will be the main protagonist in future novels as well. and Selena will be a very pivotal part of his storyline, so she'll be important later. And so basically, I do want to go into a lot more today, but I feel like I probably shouldn't, because this is already dragging along for too long. But yeah, so basically, Frenquin, An Unlikely Hero, the intro, prologue, and chapters 1 and 2 are now available for free on Wattpad. So please check them out if you are willing to take a read. I would really suggest it. Like, it's a really good story that I'm writing, and I think the long-term plans that I have for the Frenquin IP, they're going to be very hard to ignore. It is a very pivotal part of my novel publishing strategy into the future. So, and basically, I've just put a Q&A, the Q&A I was talking about earlier. I've put a Q&A in along with this episode. Basically, are you going to read Sonic Revolution or Frenquin on Wattpad? And if so, like, which ones are you going to read? Maybe. So, yes. If you're going to read both, brilliant, but even if you just read one, like, I mean, there'll be plenty of time to sort of read them both, I think. Obviously, they're both not done yet. Both of the novels are only in their starting chapters. But yeah, I think the stories are going to be like really, that it's going to be something. And like, I say this simply because I've really been sort of like planning. I've been planning Frenquin as well for years. But yeah, I will talk more about Frenquin and Sonic Revolution in the future as more chapters come out, and up until the final launch. At the final launch of both books, I'm hoping to make them available on ebook marketplaces, digital ebook marketplaces such as the Amazon Kindle store, the Google Play Books store, Apple Books, possibly Rakuten Kobo, if anyone uses one of those. But basically, like, I'm really wanting to push these novels as time goes by, and both novels will have sequels. As I did mention, there will be the shadow-centric storyline and the short stories for Sonic Revolution. And there will be plenty of Frenquin books into the future. I do also have a spin-off series planned in the future, but I'm not going to talk anything about that right now, because that's going to be a while away. Probably a good few years. But yeah, so feel free to go onto Wattpad now and take a look at Sonic Revolution and Frenquin for free. Alright, so, and that's it for the Stardom TI announcement today. So let's get into a little snippet of gaming news. Let's go. Okay, so I have one gaming-related announcement for today. So I plan on delving much deeper into the gaming news sphere in the future, to try and make the gaming news section a little more fleshed out. But basically, so the one piece of news I have for today is there have been a lot of rumours going around as of late about a new Sonic the Hedgehog 2D modern Sonic game, which is apparently going under the codename of Sonic the Hedgehog 5. I have a lot to say about that, and apparently some of these rumours are saying It's going to be built using the Retro engine. Now, I have a bit to say about this whole Retro engine thing. I'm not sure how many people actually know this, but the Retro engine, within my knowledge, technically doesn't exist anymore. So Christian Whitehead rebranded the Retro engine as the Star engine for an indie game developer that he founded. I think with a couple of the other people from Sonic Mania. But yeah, so it's funny how they mentioned the Retro engine. And there's been a lot of this, like, it's been swirling around, like, okay, so it's going to be, like, sprite-based, but it's going to be a modern Sonic game. It's just sort of like Sonic Advance, sort of like Sonic Advance Trilogy. And that's interesting. Like, I mean, it could work. And I mean, if they're really using, like, the Retro engine, or maybe, like, an older, more Sonic-centric build of the Retro engine, if the Star engine has been sort of moved away from Sonic-centric compatibility. It would be really interesting to see where they could go with that. And being made by Sonic Team, I doubt that, just because it's a 2D game. Like, in today's day and age. Like, I feel like Sonic Team's definitely very much moved on to, then again, they did make Sonic 4. Which is trash, but I mean, possibly. Like, I mean, obviously they can still make a 2D Sonic game. The question is whether they can do it well. Which, I mean, only time will tell there. Because, like, Sonic 4 was definitely episodes 1 and 2. Like, that was definitely a missed sort of opportunity. Like, that could have been better. And obviously considering, like, this was before Generation sort of cemented that design difference between modern Sonic and classic Sonic games. So I feel like if they're not gonna get, like, Gimps or even the Mania team back in, or even someone else who really knows how to make 2D games, it'd be really interesting to see, like, how could they do that? So, yeah, it would be really interesting to sort of see what they can do with that. And, like, as with a lot of other people, I don't think the game's actually going to launch under the name Sonic the Hedgehog 5. Simply because, one, it associates it with Sonic 4, which is probably a bad idea. And two, it's like, yeah, Sonic the Hedgehog 5, I don't know, like, not these days, like, they would be better off, I don't know, like, it'd probably be available on, like, PlayStation, Switch, PC, Xbox, like, maybe phones. I mean, if it's 2D like that, maybe phones. But I don't think, like, they would need a new name. I don't think they would be able to get away with just calling it Sonic the Hedgehog 5. I have a strong feeling that is literally just a code name. But, I mean, I would be interested to see what they would do with this. What Sonic Team's going to do with this, if they're really the ones developing it. And it would be funny that they say it's being developed by Sonic Team, but also made using the Retro engine. Because I'm pretty sure that Sonic Team didn't, like, that they didn't make Sonic Mania. Like, they probably would not really know how to use the retro engine. And I mean, I reckon it could be, like, alright, but after Sonic Frontiers, I have a feeling that Sonic Team is finally gaining their stride back. But for a 2D game, I feel, yeah, we'll just have to see how it goes. Obviously, there's a bit more coming before that. There's definitely going to be Sonic Origins Plus, the expansion for Sonic Origins, adding Amy Rose as a playable character, adding how many bunch of Sega Game Gear Sonic titles, just emulated. But then just some added quality of life updates. I think Knuckles is now going to be available in Sonic CD. So yeah, like, I mean, it could be interesting to really. I'm really excited to see where Sonic Team goes, or where Sega goes with the Sonic franchise from here on out. Especially after the thrilling success of last year. I mean, the second movie, Sonic Origins was sort of mixed, but I feel like they're working on fixing that with Origins Plus. And then Sonic Prime and Sonic Frontiers, like, yeah, they had a really good year last year, I'm not gonna lie. And I think the key is just to keep that momentum going. Without necessarily returning to the whole Dark Age practices of the 2000s, of trying to push out too much at once and rush what you have, and like, because obviously we all us Sonic fans know where that went. But yeah, so I'm gonna end this news segment here, and that'll be the last. That'll be the last segment for this episode of the Stardom TI official podcast today. And now I'm just going to get to the end. Okay, so we have come to the end of today's episode of the Stardom TI official podcast. So I'd like to thank you all for tuning in, if you have, if you've gotten this far especially, and definitely once again, like, check out check out Sonic Revolution and Frenquin and Unlikely Hero for free on Wattpad now. Literally just look them up. And feel free to search for Stardom TI on Facebook, and also Twitter, and make sure to like and follow for further news regarding projects and the podcast. We also have a YouTube channel just titled Stardom TI, where you can also find audio. So basically you can find the podcast episodes on YouTube. Yeah, you can, they're basically just audio files with like a video with an image thumbnail of the podcast logo. And so, yeah, that's pretty much it. Feel free to follow this podcast as well. And I'm hoping to also do some bonus episodes soon enough for basically audiobook readings of Sonic Revolution and Frenquin. So they'll be available as a monetized subscription option when they come out. And yeah, I'd very much appreciate for you listeners to really check out the books, check out what Stardom TI does, and just really get into the books I'm writing, because they obviously I've been planning them for years, and I think my future plans for both of these series is going to be really, really good. And I think there is a promising future there for the novel side of things. But for now, I will catch you guys in the next episode. Alright. This is Casey McGregor from the Stardom TI official podcast. Out.